As a new dairy cow owner myself, I cried several times while listening to this episode, where Allison interviews an extraordinary dairy woman who we are about to introduce to you. Working with a dairy cow is an experience on the farm that, in my life, can only be compared to my work as a birth doula. Spending time around a cow, a creature of routine and habit, with incredible sensitivity and usually not afraid to speak her own mind, is a moment that strikes awe and delight into every open heart. Rebecca Holden looks after a large organic dairy herd in Wales, in the United Kingdom, and makes raw cheddar-style cheese from their milk. What made us want to bring Rebecca to you is an article she wrote for the farm's blog, which she called Part of the Herd, where she talks about the farm being an interconnected community and how she herself communicates with the cows and has become part of the herd. Mainstream milk and cheese markets seem to be increasingly led by large, chemically sustained dairies that subvert nature and force cows into unnatural production routines, resulting in inferior dairy products landing on grocery store shelves. And yet, Rebecca's farm has been here, doing things organically for 50 years. We really wanted to know about her world, and we really wanted to share it with you. This episode will take you right into the milking parlor and then out the farm gate into the lush pastures of Wales, and you will feel the sun on your face and feel the swaying cows as they move beside you and you become part of the herd.
Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen. I'm delighted today to welcome Rebecca Holden to the podcast. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Hi. Rebecca looks after an organic dairy herd in Wales, in the United Kingdom, and makes raw cheddar-style cheese from the cow's milk. And the thing that really made me want to bring Rebecca to you is an article I read that she wrote for her farm's blog, which she called Part of the Herd, where she talks about how the farm is an interconnected community and how she herself communicates with her cows and how she really has become part of the herd of the animals. The mainstream milk cheese market seems to be becoming scarily led by large chemically sustained dairies that work against nature, and Rebecca's farm has been there doing things organically for 50 years, and I really want to know about her world and share it with you. Thank you ever so much for coming on and talking to us, Rebecca.
Well, thanks for having me.
Can you tell me what the last thing you ate is? That's the first question we always ask our guests.
Well, we had breakfast quite a few hours ago, after a swim in the pond to set us up for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it was based around our raw milk. So it was muesli with some stewed rhubarb and our milk, which is delicious, and then coffee with our milk.
And do you grow the rhubarb there?
I do, and I love rhubarb, and this is the first year that it's really the gift that keeps on giving.
Lovely, lovely. Now, I just want to ask about your pond briefly. How cold is it there at the moment?
It's pretty cold, but it is starting to warm up. It's spring-fed, and it's an interesting, if we're thinking about our intervention in the ecosystem, I really think our pond benefits from us swimming in it every day, because part of it is maintenance and a lot of the weed, which means that the light and the oxygen keeps getting in, and there's a lot more biodiversity than there would be if we weren't swimming in it every day.
That's really
an
interesting
thing
yeah.
to remember.
I've never thought about that. You know, I know a lot about cold exposure, and my husband does cold showers here. We don't have access to a kind of any natural water like that. But I never thought about it from the perspective of the pond life. I've only thought about it from the perspective of what it does to your immune system and your own health. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of setting the clock, and I mean, I don't know what I do with that cold water immersion. I think I've naturally become or am a jangly person who tends to sort of disintegrate a little bit, dashing between one thing and another. And I think the cold water just reboots me and resets me.
Wow. Lovely. It's nice to hear. So tell our listeners about your farm, about your cows, and about the cheese that you make.
So we are lucky enough to live and exist on this little hill in West Wales. It's wet this morning, grey skies, but we've had a beautiful week last week. We own 135 acres. In total, we probably farm 300. The rest is rented, but mostly adjacent to the hill. So it's the whole hill, the top of the hill, the bottom, the wet parts. Each part of that hill, it's interesting because you've got the south, the west, the east, the north facing flanks of the hill. So it's an interesting hill to exist on. And it's not favoured land, so it's quite tough farming. But the challenges and opportunities are infinite. And I guess in terms of our end product, cheese, I think cheesemakers often think, okay, I want to make this kind of cheese, therefore I need this kind of milk, therefore I'm going to need this kind of cow eating this kind of diet. And they sort of work backwards from their final product. Whereas I would say 50 years on this hill and only the last chapter of sort of 10, 12 years of cheese making, we start off more confidently as farmers, probably. So we work forward from the fact that we have this hill. Naturally, it wants to do certain things. It's wet land at the bottom and it's thin soils. We can work with that, and there are certain things that will grow well and positively, and then we work forward from there, saying what sort of animals are suited to this land. And in our case, we've chosen mainly the Ayrshire breed of cow. Ayrshire's are native to Scotland. They're a hardy breed that copes well on a wet, windy hill, so they're suited to this place. And from there, we want that herd to work mainly without too many external inputs, so really living off this hill. And from there, we trust that the milk will be a positive reflection of this hill and the animals' interaction with this hill. And from there, with very good cheesemakers, we're able to transform that into hopefully delicious raw milk cheese.
Yeah, it's so lovely to hear that it's kind of land-led, geography-led, climate-led. It's not saying, okay, what do we want to bring to market and how can we make this space fit that market? It's looking and saying, what is around me and what can I work with that land to produce, which really is the key to a sustainable diet for all of us. We should all be looking around at what the land around us can provide and then finding ways to bring that into our kitchen. So it's really lovely to hear that that's your entire kind of raison d'etre there.
And hopefully that brings true terroir, or in Welsh we call it flasatir, which is sort of taste of the land.
Yeah.
Are you looking for a powerful source of nutrients to enhance your overall health and well-being? Look no further than beef organ capsules from One Earth Health, where the cattle graze on lush New Zealand pastures. The beef organs are sourced from 100% pasture-raised cattle, ensuring that you receive the highest quality and most nutrient-dense organ meat available. Beef organs are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth, with high levels of vitamins A, K, and the B complex. Customers report more energy, improved skin health, and a strengthened immune system thanks to the powerful nutrients found in these organs. For a limited time, One Earth Health is offering our Ancestral Kitchen podcast listeners a 5% discount on all orders, and free shipping. We checked and we saw, even before any discounts, they were more affordable than other New Zealand based organ supplements with all the pristine nutritive value we wanted in place. Take advantage of their amazing price and the extra discount and the free shipping. Order now and enjoy the incredible health benefits of One Earth Health's beef organs, made with care and quality in New Zealand. Visit oneearthhealth.com/ancestral kitchen, and I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. So, what's your role particularly within that network? What do you do?
Well, on a good day, I'd say I fill lots of gaps. On a bad day, I'd say I do a lot of things badly. I'd say mostly as time has gone on, I've become more involved with the herd and the milking. So I probably do. We have a full-time milker who does half the milkings, and then we do the other half. So, but at certain periods, like we've been doing nearly all of it, certainly during the couple of years of COVID. So a lot of milking. Obviously, with two businesses, the cheese business and the farm business, a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin. And on if I'm needed to go in and turn cheese or help in the cheese room, then I'll do that. I'm not a good cheese maker. I might have been in another life, but I don't think I've got the sustained attention to stay in a cheese room, particularly for our make, which is a 10, 12-hour make, and keep that sustained attention. Luckily, we've got extraordinary cheesemakers. But I'm very happy in the store to spend 10 hours turning cheese or all of those support roles. But I don't make the cheese, but I certainly milk the cows and milk the vegetables.
Okay.
And just that interaction with the land. We have help. We have contractors who do a lot of our field work. But 50 years on the land for Patrick, my husband particularly, and he's as enthusiastic about every field now as he was 50 years ago. It's a privileged place to be, because you really can see the cycles, but also the successes of farming organically and letting the land show its potential.
Yeah. In your wonderful article, which I will link in the show notes, titled, as I said in the introduction, Part of the Herd, you talk about how the landscape is your provider, your doctor, your friend, and your teacher, and how you learn from the cows. I just thought that was such a wonderful image, and I wanted you to tell us a little bit about how the community that you're part of gives you each of those things.
Well, we've already talked about that, the pond swims. I mean, that certainly is my key to my mental health. I think so many things in farming aren't seen, but are so valuable. And if I think about all the jobs you might do in a 12-hour period and how they might stretch you on so many different levels, but actually give so much back as well. The physical work. I mean, the physical work of farming is it's difficult, but it's also, you don't get that in many other walks of life. And I think I'm lucky to feel fit and strong, but I'm also very aware that our physical health is so important, and we can't take it for granted, because it helps us. Every inch in our body is helping us daily to do good work. And I think as a teacher, it really does. The things I've been taught from the cows, and in many ways, so I have 4 children, and they're grown up now, and I didn't do as much milking when the kids were growing up. And in a way, I wish I'd spent more time with the cows before I became a mum, because I think I would have been a better mother. So the cows are so sentient and so insightful, and they see so much of us, our true personality and our true manifestations. And I think they can be a good, check to how you're starting your day and how you're manifesting right from the start of the day. I think that's a really good lesson. To be shown how you are coming across at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So I certainly think that they've taught me to be a better person. I think cows are so trusting and forgiving. I think I'm struck again and again by their forgiving nature, because we ask them to do so many things that they don't actually want to do. Certainly when you bring in a vet and you've got to test a whole herd, or you've got to ask them to do things that they don't want to do, and they don't judge you, they don't hold on to that, they forgive, and they know how to move on. So they're, and I also think they're very I think that they bring out the caring nature in you. You want them to feel better for being with you. You want them to feel better for that hour and a half that you're all meeting up in the parlour twice a day. So I think it brings out a nurturing side in anyone if they are looking after cows. And on our scale, it's quite a big herd. There are 90 milking cows.
Yeah.
And then we're looking after 60 odd young stock and younger animals coming up behind. And we're a closed herd. So we don't buy in animals. They're raised on the farm, we grow up on the farm, and they come through into milking. And so that's quite a big herd of animals to work with. And I think that requires certain understanding about how you might fit as another member of that. And I think that a lot of that comes down to sort of being with them when they're young, and I never cease to be amazed by how cows can read people, whether it's strangers or whether it's people who are with them every day.
Can you give us some examples of the relationships you've formed with some of them? Because you've seen some of them, I presume, from literally the moment they're born. And I'm fascinated to hear about how that relationship develops between human and cow, and what form it takes.
Yeah, well, again, because of the scale, because it is larger than just having a micro dairy where you can really have close relationships, we do have to. I sort of often think of us like a bit of a beehive, like a group of bees that all know their roles and work together. And I have cows. I don't have favourites, but the cows that I work with the closest may not be the cows that would let me touch them or stroke them or have a photo with them. So it's very individual relationships, and the beauty of having them from calves is that it builds up. I have a different kind of language with the cows. I have a different tone of voice with the cows, and similar actually to the kind of voice that I had with the children when they were little. And part of that is about, it's more when I'm trying to call them, and if they're 4 fields away, I have to be able to project, and I don't have a big voice. So I use slightly, I suppose it's a little bit like yodeling. And I think there have been examples of yodeling anywhere where there are cows grazing and being milked and people herding them. And mine is not musical or melodic at all, but it does work. And if I start that when they're small, it means that even when I'm moving groups of calves around the farm to grazing, they will connect to my voice. And rather than having to chase them with a quad bike or a dog, I can lead them. And I'd much rather do that than to move a group of animals around. I'd rather know that I've connected with them and that they are following me. Possibly just because they know I'll take them to nice new grass. But that voice association is there, and it means that we already have a bond, which doesn't have to be a touchy-feely, cuddly bond, but it's an understanding and a trust. And so building that up from when they're very young and making sure that they know my voice and what they associate with my voice is a big part of starting to build the relationships.
Yeah.
But so much of it is about trust. And we have quite an old clunky parlour. We milk in a tenor breast parlour. A breast means that they all sort of walk in, they step up into a step at the step, and then I'm working with their back. I'm working at their level. They're slightly higher than me, but my shoulder is against their side.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's instinctive, and it's really nice because a lot of it's about vibration. They can feel me, I can feel them. I usually sing quite quietly to them all, but I don't need to. So they know that there's that touch and that quite an intimate exchange from the time they're being milked, which I'm not sure you would get in a bigger parlour where they're sort of out of reach. They're just putting a cluster on at arm's length almost.
Yeah.
So I really value the way we milk them, because once they're in the milking herd, you can build up that trust even more. And I need to have that trust because we have quite a lot of visitors to the farm, and a lot of people like to have a go at milking, and I need to trust that they won't flinch, and it won't be unsettling for them, and that they're not likely to kick the person who's trying to milk a cow for the first time.
Do you feel like, you talked earlier about how you have to sometimes get them to do things they just don't want to do. Do you think that they do those things because they trust you, or do you have a particular way of getting them to do? Because I can't even imagine trying to get a cow to do something that it doesn't want to do. And so I'm fascinated by how that mechanism of that works.
Yeah. Well, then you are, and that is the thing that's interesting about cows, because you relate to them individually, but you relate to them as a herd as well. So if you're trying to TB test, where you're trying to get 150 animals to go into a race, and then through a crush, and there's a strange person there, and you're already that's going to bring in all their flight instincts. So then you're working with them as a herd, and and there are 2 or 3 leader cows in the herd that I absolutely know will be at the front and will give confidence to the rest of the herd. And so it's really working with those key characters in the herd that the others will follow. And that's about observation, and it's about understanding the dynamics of the herd. And I can watch the cows going up to grazing, and you know who will be at the front, and you know who will be at the back, and so working within those herd dynamics is the best way to be able to get cows to do things they don't want to do as a group of 80 odd, 90 odd cows, without having to shout, wield sticks, and frighten everyone, including themselves.
Yeah. Okay. So what's your role within that herd? If the cows are kind of have this relationship with you and they see you as one of them, are you up there like the leader, or what part do you play in that herd?
I do have to be the leader. I have to be, so I do have to be one of the, I do have to know that they won't take me on, because cows can be quite aggressive with each other. You see the pecking orders, and they can be awful to the sort of young heifers that join the herd, or anyone who's been out as a dry cow in another grazing group rejoins the herd. They get bashed around by the leaders. So you have to know that you will be seen as the one that they will sort of respect as a lead cow. So I think that's my place. I was watching something about moving cattle the other day, and it said that the best people who work with cows need to be confident introverts. And I would definitely say that I'm an introvert. I quite like the idea that I might be a confident introvert. So I think that there's that thing where they know it does come down to trust. I do think that they trust that whatever they're asked to do by me or by Patrick or by Keith, who works with us, they trust that we're not going to take them into danger.
Yeah.
And that's just a primal, simple instinct that we've established.
Yeah.
We're not going to take them into danger.
Let's talk a bit about their sensitivity, because they're not necessarily an animal in a mainstream that is tied to, being extraordinarily sensitive. And you've worked with them so closely for so long with such regularity. Could you talk a bit about how you feel they have this sensitivity, which is just incredible?
I mean, there are so many examples over the years of situations, and I don't have much experience of sheep, so I can't compare. And I often, when we have sheep on the farm that are our neighbour's sheep and they might be grazing for a short while, if you see one that's caught up in the brambles and you want to go and help it, I always think they don't really see that I'm trying to help them. Whereas cows, you can really see how when something's gone wrong, when they've had a difficult calving, they really do sort of, again, it comes down to trust, and they let you help them. And I would even say, and they're grateful. They're grateful for the help. There was one extraordinary situation with a cow, and it's a rather sad story. But she went down. So you get downer cows, and they're such heavy beasts that when they, for whatever reason, when they're down on the ground, they find if they're not well, or they've hurt themselves, or they've got a nerve, the longer they're down, the harder it is for them to get up. And we had this cow that was like that, and we tried lifting her, and we couldn't lift her, but we did lift her, but it wasn't helping. And after about a week, I realised we were going to have her destroyed. And I went in and I sort of sat down with her and I cried for various reasons. But I was crying, and she licked my head for a sustained, amount of time. She was comforting me, and that's an extraordinary thing, because she'd obviously was in a difficult place herself, but she had the consideration, the empathy, the trust and the love to comfort me. And there have been so many examples of that, where you just see how they're looking at you, reading you, and sensing so much about you. And as I say, I have this cow that I work with a lot, Oats and Peas, who is the leader cow, not because she's very dominant or bossy, but just because when they go to grass, she sets the pace and everyone follows her. And sometimes if I know I've got a difficult, I've got to move them out onto the road and then go up to a crossroads and then turn right, and it's a difficult ask. And I remember once I looked and she wasn't at the front ready to join me as my co-worker, she was right at the back. And I thought, goodness, she's not going to help me today. And I was nervous, I thought this isn't going to go as easily as I expected. So I opened the gate and I thought, goodness, I don't have a relationship with the one who's at the front. She's not going to do what Oats and Peas do. And as soon as I moved the latch on the gate, I saw Oats and Peas go from the back, move through the herd, which was tightly packed, as they were all waiting at the gate, right next to, at my shoulder, and ready to go. And to have that kind of relationship with a cow who actually doesn't like being touched, she wouldn't want me to stroke her, say thank you or anything, but we can look at each other and know that there's a job to be done and we can do it together.
That's wonderful.
And it's so empowering and heartening.
Yeah. I feel hearing your story of the cow that was down gave me goosebumps, because just incredible. And I feel it's such a travesty the way that, now these days more cows are being kept in such confined conditions, and so many of them, and treated in a way that is really inhumane. And I'm so grateful for people like yourself and Patrick who are doing the work to keep cows in a beautiful and humane way and produce amazing food. So it just makes me grateful for the people like you who are doing such amazing work.
Well, I think scale is fascinating, because I could often ask myself, at what scale would we stop relating to them individually and as a group? And I think we are, in terms of obviously we choose the amount of animals we have in relation to the land we have and what the land can produce for them. And obviously that draws a line. And thank goodness, it'd be very tempting to say, we can sell more cheese. We have lots
Mm.
of fantastic customers. Therefore, we should have a bit more milk. Therefore, either we squeeze more out of the cows by buying in a different kind of feed and not feeding them the homegrown forage and oats that we grow,
Mm.
or we get more cows to supply that demand. But there's something very empowering about being limited by the land as well.
Yeah, completely. I just interviewed, I think I told you, Carwyn Graves recently, and his book, Welsh Food Stories, the land that you are on, the culinary delights that have come from that place, but very, very limited, because like you just said, limited by the land that was around them and what could grow in that land. And Wales in particular is so diverse, that has so many different kind of growing environments, but there's like you said, there's an empowerment in taking what's around you and producing something sustaining, full of nutrients and beautiful from it completely.
Absolutely. And his book is such a gift, because I don't think anybody's really shouted about the extraordinary diversity of food produced in Wales, and he really is celebrating it so beautifully. And I think it's very easy to say, oh, Wales just grows grass. But, we are perfectly, I think a generation ago, there were 100 odd mills in just this area where we are alone. And yet now we're one of very few growers who grow cereals in our land, spring-sown oats. And yet there is absolutely potential to grow cereals and to grow a lot more fruit and veg. And I love that idea of the diversity of nutrition possible per acre, but working obviously with what the land can do. And it can do a lot. We're very fortunate in Wales.
Yeah. How do you feel about the land that you're working on, and that you're taking care of? What are your emotions towards it?
Oh, again, I can get goosebumps just thinking about this land, because there is so much magic in Wales, and it's at every level. It's in the language, it's in the folklore, it's in the song, and it's in nature and in the farmed landscape. Patrick said something about how it feels like nature can still be in the ascendant around us, and but I also, going back to Carwyn's book and some of the work that Carwyn's doing, I'm very, very mindful of that connection to what went before, and the history of land use and land production in Wales, because it's a fascinating one, and I think we need to make sure that we don't lose it, which is a lot about celebrating Wales through its language and its song. And so I think there's a lot for me to do in reconnecting with what went on in the past here and understanding the history of this land. But it's such an extraordinary place to be, because we have a patchwork of fields. They all have their own individual identity. They all have their own individual gift to give to us and the cows. And I think you have to be really careful to just keep letting that natural potential of what the land can offer, and keeping that very much alive.
Yeah. I think that what went before, you said, and I feel like with your cheese making there, you are carrying on. You have in life still a tradition that definitely went before, because Wales is has such a rich history of cheese making. And I wondered if we could kind of segue into your cheese making a little bit. You have a purpose-built dairy there, so you're getting the milk from the cows and you're actually making the cheese on site. Could you tell us a little bit about the dairy and the process and the recipe for your particular cheese?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot since it started. I think we're fortunate in the UK that there's a growing renaissance of farmhouse and artisan cheesemaking, which is just extraordinary. And it's down to a few visionary people 30, 40 years ago, helping to revive some of the old recipes cheese making, and some of the almost lost farmhouse cheeses. So there's a very joined up community of people passionate about selling farmhouse and artisan cheese, and people making cheese on farm. So we are very grateful to have had the most amazing influences and friendships that have helped us travel this journey of trying to find the best way to express our farm through cheese. And a lot of it is about going back and looking at what went before. And I think I can say that ours is a very, very traditional cheddar make. Obviously, over the years, cheddar is a global commodity cheese. You can find it in the supermarket anywhere, probably in the world in one way. But ours is a very, very, just going back to how it was as they sort of turned from farmhouse cheese making and started to commercialize it. We've gone back to those sort of recipes, the slower, the gentler recipes, where we're not trying to go fast and hard to create what eventually becomes a commodity. So cheddar is quite difficult to make. It's a long day. But another thing we're fortunate about is, again, partly it's through just making connections. We have the most extraordinary cheesemakers that pass through and that are still with us, who have always been curious, and curiosity and questioning and wanting to explore the real truth behind our cheesemaking. And so that means going back into the old books. And I know that when I look at sort of current journals or reports or writings on cheese or on farming, actually, you can quickly become bamboozled and potentially lose confidence just by the jargon, the language.
Okay.
But if you go back to the old books, the books that were written, certainly for our cheese making at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, and for our farming, again, the early 1900s into the 30s and 40s and 50s. Those are so much more accessible, so much more confidence boosting, and so much more common sense. And I think there's a width there's something very affirming about reading things that make sense. And so, our cheese making is it's probably a slower, gentler make than most cheddars. And again, we have cheesemakers that are dealing with a very, it's a raw milk cheese. Our milk changes every day. We'll never be able to promise the same butter, fat, and protein and solids constituency and ratios. So it really takes an intuitive, curious cheesemaker to say, the milk's behaving this way today. I'll respond this way. And so there's a conversation there in the cheese room. And I think another thing we're very lucky about is that most of our cheesemakers, certainly in the last few years, have also worked on the farm. So they've got that connection to the milk and that respect for the milk and that trust for the milk that can only come from when you've milked a cow or when you've looked after calves and you've been on the land with the cows. So we're again, scale is an interesting thing because, if we got too big, we wouldn't be able to have that kind of interconnectedness between the farm and the cheese.
Yeah. I think the uniformity is a really interesting point because, as consumers, we've been taught to want to expect the same thing every single time. We want a packet of cheese to taste the same as the last packet of cheese we had. We want a beer to taste exactly the same as it tasted 6 months ago. And in reality, food is not that way. The soil changes, the seasons change, the pests, the protein and the carbs and all the individual ingredients change. And therefore, in reality, food is not the same. And we're doing something to it to make it the same, which is unnatural. And so, to hear that your cheesemakers are taking that milk and it's different, week by week, month by month, year by year, and they understanding how to get the best out of that particular type of milk, but that in the end, your cheese isn't necessarily going to taste the same. Each round of cheese you make is going to be unique because it's from those animals, it's from that milk, it's from that weather, it's from whatever they were eating. And it's not something that our food society is moving towards. We seem to be moving towards this uniformity, and yet there's such beauty and knowledge and delicacy and value and integrity in artisanal cheese, like your cheese, that tastes different each time.
And again, we are lucky, and I'm feel so fortunate that all the customers there's an amazing community of independent retailers that are selling our cheese, and that are as passionate about sharing that diversity of flavours and appreciating that bandwidth of profiles. That we couldn't do it without them. And I would say virtually every customer we sell our cheese to is a relationship. So we are not just a name in a catalogue. They visit the farm. Some of them spend one or two nights a year. They'll milk the cows. They'll walk the fields, and so to have that kind of commitment and support from the people who are buying your cheese to sell on to customers, we couldn't ask for better champions.
That's beautiful. There are so many heroes in this food world, and it feels to me like I got goosebumps again when you were talking about it, because the more that we're involved with our food, the closer we are, the more we value it, the more we care about it, the more we care about keeping that environment and that sustainability. And so it's the way that we are able to champion this way of making food as opposed to an industrial way going forward. And and also it's so fulfilling personally to build those relationships with farmers, that from my end, that my way of eating now, when I have relationships with the man that I buy my meat from, the people that I buy my cheese from, where I get my eggs from, I just feel so different about my food when it's on my plate to how I did much earlier in my life when I was being fed from a supermarket, and I didn't feel that. I have such gratitude, and I feel so kind of conscious and alive in life,
Yeah, and inspired. Yeah.
Completely.
No, and it works both ways, so for the producer, it's so, it's such a powerful thing when we get cheese. We've had visitors from all over the world, but, when just a cheesemonger who hasn't been here before but has been selling our cheese, giving it to customers as a sample, or talking about it from what they've read, and then they come here and experience the beauty of this place. I mean, even if we just let them go around the fields, they would connect. They would understand why our cheese is here. So many of the smells, you can open a Havod and it would have been, it would have been traveling. But you open the box and you can smell our farm. And I think just the microbiology of reconnecting with the microbiology of, because cheese is such a live food, isn't it? And you can look at the rind and you can see so many strong impressions just from opening the cheese, looking at the rind and smelling the cheese, and those all come alive when you visit.
How do you feel about our food world? Do you want to see change like we do? If so, head over to patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast and help support us to get this work out as far and wide as we can. To say thank you, we've got a host of extra ancestral food material to share with you. You can connect with us more deeply via our Patreon exclusive podcasts, our after show chats, our dedicated forum, and our ancestral food get-togethers. And there's a library of downloads that will support you in your own kitchen. By joining, you'll be really helping us to continue making this podcast and to focus on having a bigger impact, reaching more people, making a greater difference, so we can move together towards the future food world we all want to see. We've got 4 levels of support to suit different pockets. Check out www.patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast for all the details. Why do you make your cheese with raw milk? Why do you decide to go down that route and not pasteurize?
It was just, I mean, we do have to pasteurize sometimes. So we can look at the contrast. We have to pasteurize if we're under TB restrictions. We have to pasteurize. We would pasteurize some batches for export because they would only take them as. So we do pasteurize, and we can look at the difference. And pasteurizing, you get this blank slate, obviously, because you've taken out. And the cheese is good. It tastes great because the milk is good. But it doesn't have that complexity and those layers of flavour. And it's not the gift of flavours that the raw milk is. It was a no-brainer for us to always make a raw milk cheese, partly because of some of the inspiration from these amazing other cheesemakers that helped us get started. But, we know how delicious our milk is. We drink it every day. Why would we want to pasteurize it?
Yeah. I love what you said about the gift of flavours. That's a really nice phrase, that it's kind of a bounty. It's a gift that's coming to you. It's lovely.
Yeah, and I think it's a generous cheese. I like to think that it's a generous cheese that, it stays with you for longer than just the mouthful once it's gone.
Yeah.
It's generous cheese that keeps on giving for
That's nice.
a long time. It's not a strong cheese. And often when I've done a few food fairs and things where I've been sampling out, and often people with cheddar, they want a strong cheddar, and they'll come and they'll say, and I sort of explain it, and then they'll say, oh, well, I don't want to taste that. If it's not strong, I only like strong cheddar. And then they'll take a piece, and then I'll see them walk away, and then I'll see them slow down as they're walking away. And then they might turn around and come back. And just because that complexity and those layers that keep on stay in the mouth even after you've walked away.
Yeah, that's lovely.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Your cheese is called Havod, which is HAFOD. Can you explain to listeners why you called it that?
Well, there were various reasons. It mostly comes back to we rent some land called Havod. Havod is a word that you'll see in a lot of places around Wales. It means summer pasture. So it's that. It goes back to that idea of transhumance, where you take animals to certain land at certain times of the year, so grazing in summer. And we rent some land called Havod, which is a couple of miles away. We've been renting it for 40 odd years. It's extraordinary land, down a lot of river meadows, and then some land above a road. And it is, some of it's a site of special scientific interest in terms of grassland. So again, that's farming. It's created that site of special scientific interest through meadows and haymaking. And it's beautiful land where we send our dry cows and our in-calf heifers some years we can take them as soon as we could be taking them this weekend. So they could go down as soon as the conditions allow, and then they'll stay there in various groups. They'll come and go through to September. So that's land that we have a connection with. But in a bigger picture, it is such a wonderful idea when you connect it to cheese, and there is so much of it where the animals go on to land, and the cheese is made. If we think about some of the outdoor pastures and the transhumance moving the cattle out for the summer, it's certainly nothing as big or ambitious as that, but it's a beautiful word. It's also very easy to pronounce. So, if we'd used our farm name, which is Bwern and Bawr, that's not so easy to name a cheese after. So it was a nice, easy word as well.
Yeah. No, it's.
But it is a beautiful image as well.
It's got lots wrapped up in it, for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's before I let you go, let's talk a bit about oats. People who listen to the podcast regularly will know I'm rather enthusiastic about oats. And your farm doesn't just have cows. You are a mixed farm, and as such, you do grow some crops. So you've got spring sown cereals in a arable rotation, and I think I read that about half your farm is arable and half is pasture. the cows. Is that right?
Yeah, well, in the rotation, well, yeah. So half of the farm is can be put into the arable
Ah, I
rotation,
see.
but we only grow 20 odd acres a year. So it's just moving around the farm, and it'll be a couple of years of cereals and then 5-6 years going back to grass.
Ah, I see. Okay. So that cereal growing is adding to your biodiversity there, and also building your own self-sufficiency because you're using those crops to feed your cows. Um, the particular crops that I'm interested in are oats, and I know that you joined the Gaia Foundation's Seed Sovereignty Network that's reviving heritage cereal grains in Wales. And you got some, I believe, some black and some grey oat seed, and then planted them by hand in 2021, and then slowly you're scaling that up. Tell us a little bit about how you feel about that and what you're doing with the oats there.
I mean, I don't know how much Colin talked about it, but the whole story of how that came about is so beautiful and so rooted in place and in language and song, actually. So there's an amazing farmer called Gerald Miles who was trying to find these black oats from his youth that he remembered growing as a boy. And I think he wrote to Farmers Weekly, he approached seed libraries, and had no luck. And then an extraordinary young man called Owen Shears, who had travelled widely in the world and was looking at sort of indigenous song that was being lost, and suddenly thought, well, that's happening in my county of Cardiff, West Wales. And so he came back home and he had started trying to find some of the old songs from the land and poems and putting them to music and just reviving the lost song of agriculture and rural life in Wales, and in particularly in our county. And so he was joining up farmers through song, and he met Gerald, and he also knew Yuan, who's an extraordinary farmer just a bit further up the coast, who was actually growing these black oats and the grey oats for his chickens quietly and hadn't stopped. So that, along with lots of other very enthusiastic, amazing people, the Welsh Grain Network, facilitated by the Gaia Foundation, was born. And so there are lots of varieties of wheats, barleys, rye, and some extraordinary oats that were some of them only in small envelopes, being handed out to people who were willing to grow them, to bulk them for more seed. And we were given 2 sweetie jars of one of the black oats, but mixed with other wild oats and white oats as well, and grey oats, and we grew them. So one harvest was all done by hand, sown by hand, weeded by hand, harvested by hand. The following year, we were able to go back to the machinery that we used for the rest of our oats, which are just anonymous organic oats that we buy in. And so this year we must put in an acre of these. So we've reached that point where we would almost imagine, having enough oats next year to have a whole field. They're not our oats at the moment. We're just bulking them for the grain network, but they're doing lots of work as well to understand the viability and whether there's a possibility to process the oats and use them more widely. We grow oats to feed our cows. We combine them in September. Usually, we get the weather windows, and then we're able to get straw afterwards, which is obviously our bedding. And then we mill them daily. I haven't done it yet for today, but we mill them on a roller mill and feed that muesli, if you like, in the parlour. And so we haven't tried that with the black oats yet, but because at the moment we are just growing them for seed. But they're extraordinary. They're in the field. They look amazing. They're tall. They're very beautiful. They're very elegant looking oats in the field. And the oat itself is this beautiful black colour and very shiny. So I think it's probably a really good oil content. I think they used to feed black oats to racehorses. So they're an amazing crop, and you do see the wildlife. All the birds and badgers that would go for our crops once they're ready, seem to home in on those native oats. I think they know something that we don't. We only intuitively feel. They already know it. So it will be fascinating as the years go on to find out the sort of the nutrition in these oats,
Mm.
and hopefully eventually to imagine, growing a field scale crop of these oats, which are so suited to the place and which are so rooted in history,
Yeah.
and absolutely should be revived
Yeah.
and imagined again in the landscape.
So you haven't
And again,
eaten any of those oats, have you? Because you're just growing them
no,
on.
we chewed them.
Okay.
We chewed them in the field when we harvested them, but we haven't attempted to mill them. I think we can. The group has looked at. They've done a few recipes with them, so there are all sorts of possibilities, but we haven't. Cows haven't yet. But very exciting.
I'll put a link in the show notes because there is a beautiful video which explains that project that someone really put some love into, and it highlights the farmers that you were talking about, and just the kind of miracle of this, music researcher who brought them back together. And it's such a joyful project. Whatever I've read about it just seems so just joyful and enthusiastic, and just wonderful things happening. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes so people who are listening can go and watch that video.
And I wrote a piece for the Sustainable Food Trust about it from a farmer's perspective, because again, we can very easily become or look at things from a machine scale and think about how is the drill going to get into the field? Do we need to widen that gate? And so to grow cereals on a human scale again was an extraordinary reconnecting thing. And I think that's what's so beautiful about what can happen when you start to sort of go small. Is you just strengthen all the connections that are so important to growing food.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. I'll link the article that you wrote because I have read that. I've seen that on the Sustainable Food Trust website. We haven't mentioned, but we have a previous episode, number 46, where I talked to Rebecca's husband, Patrick Holden. So you can link the kind of two together, because the farm that we talk about in that episode is the very same farm that Rebecca's with those cows every day. Thank you ever so much. Where can people come and see pictures of your farm and potentially buy the cheese and just find out more about you?
Well, we're not very good at marketing, so which is why again I'm so grateful for those cheesemongers that are. It's available online. We have a website, www.holdenfarmdairy.co.uk. I do Instagram as much as I can. I don't do any of the others, but Instagram is @HaveOnCheese.
Okay.
And again, Patrick's wider work. There's a lot to talk about there in the Sustainable Food Trust, and just looking at food systems, and again, there's an ache of urgency there with the bigger food systems. Just try and I this idea of scale, and I just feel very fortunate that what we do is still, I consider it a human scale.
Yeah.
So much of food production and food engagement needs to go back to that.
Yeah, and that's really why I wanted to take what you're doing and showcase it just for an hour, because it is human and it goes right down to the connections you have with the cows every day, and the variety in the cheese and the weather and the land, and it epitomizes what good food is, and good food is sustainable as well as really, really tasty, and is beneficial for everyone involved. And the fact that it's clear that you feel so grateful and empowered for the role that you're doing there. You're ever so happy by the sound of it with your work, and that's just a wonderful thing because it's catching.
Well, I often say, Patrick is Tigger and I'm Eel, because I tend to be a little bit stuck in the thistles, and he sees opportunity after opportunity, and as I say, he is enthusiastic about every field on this farm as he was 50 years ago. There's something very, very exciting about that. So he has lots of big ideas for going forward, and I think one of them is about bringing people to farms, because farms are at such extraordinary stages for exchange and for conversation, for engagement. So I think that's his next big chapter.
Yeah, I remember talking to him about that, and just him saying that people's views have been completely changed just by spending a couple of days with you, and how we are so removed from it now. You talked about physicality at the beginning and how the farm keeps you fit. And I think about, I live in Italy, I think about the Italian grandmothers that everyone knows, and they're living till 90, and everyone thinks, oh, it's the olive oil and that. And then I see them all still out over their beans and their tomatoes, bending down, going out every day, tilling and, planting and harvesting. And they're doing that every single day. That's how they've lived. And that's a huge part of them living till 90. It's not just that they're eating olive oil, it's that they're going out in the light and the air and they're moving themselves every day. And it's a real kind of dedication to the land that they live like that. And I feel like
Yes.
that's part of the story as well. Making it sustainable is making humankind sustainable as well. It's keeping us healthy, like you said.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, we haven't even started to talk about the microbiology, the sort of those nutrients that can be found that when I think about the cows, I think about wild health is another thing that's incredibly positive about if you're farming the land this way, then you're enabling that wild health. Everything that goes on in the hedgerows, everything that goes on the edge of the field or the different part in the field, and those individual fields have that individual wild health potential, which we can tap into too, which I hope comes across the cheese as well. So that you're connecting with nature and nature's power.
Yeah. Yeah, everything about what you're doing is amazing. Thank you for the work that you and Patrick are doing there. I'm ever so grateful. And I just want to come and try some of the cheese. I haven't had any. I'm hoping that I can get back to the UK in the summer, and I'm going to be on the trail of some of your cheese.
Oh, well, I'm always grateful for visitors, because I think, West Wales is quite a bit of a way to get to, and anyone who sort of comes as far as us, I sort of think, come visit, come stay, come milk the cows.
Yeah. Come eat some cheese.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much for your time, Rebecca. I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you.
And for sharing what you do with the people who listen to us. Thank you ever so much. Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth, and Alison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.